Welcome to the Shift Your Story, Change Your Life podcast. I'm Allie Rose, certified clinical hypnotherapist and subconscious success coach. I help my clients stop self-sabotage and feel safe to create more wealth, worth, and wellness from within. If you find yourself stuck repeating the same unhelpful patterns in your life, health, business, or relationships, even after all the mindset work, this podcast is for you. Each week, you'll hear deep dives into the hidden beliefs shaping your life and live hypno coaching sessions where someone shifts a block in real time. Because willpower isn't the problem, your subconscious story is. And when you shift it at the root, everything else begins to change. So let's dive in. Hello. Welcome back to the Shift Your Story, Change Your Life podcast. Today, we're talking about something that shows up for so many people, and that is overthinking. And it's not the kind of thinking that helps you plan or reflect or make thoughtful decisions, but it's that thinking that loops. It keeps you stuck in your head. It feels urgent and exhausting, and somehow it still never resolves anything. So, what I have found is overthinking is one of those patterns that people tend to either blame themselves for or they don't even realize that it's happening. And so I'm excited to help you either recognize that this is something that you're struggling with or shift the way that you think about it. But before we dive in, as always, Safiya, thank you so much for joining me to have this conversation. How are you feeling about this topic?
I'm feeling good. I feel like you always pick topics that I'm like, interesting. I've been talking about this recently with someone. So yeah, I'm looking forward to sort of diving into it.
Yeah. Okay. So you say that you've been talking recently. So is this because you fall into overthinking yourself or?
Uh so only sometimes. Although I'm curious to hear how you define it because maybe after you define it, I'll discover that I do it more often than I think. But yeah, I do find that when I'm in this if certain things are going on, I'm more prone to overthinking than others. So that was the conversation I was having with a friend of mine. Hmm,
Right. Yeah. Okay. Wonderful.
we'll
Yeah.
see.
So yeah, I guess we'll see. Sorry not to put you on the spot there.
I'm sure we'll expand on it a little bit more later. You kind of briefly went into what you mean when you talk about overthinking earlier, but I'd like to dive a little bit deeper into that just so that we're kind of clear
Sure.
what we're talking about. We do our little definition, which I love. So, what do you what are we actually talking about when we talk about overthinking?
As you said, I mentioned at the beginning, it's not being thoughtful, it's not being reflective, it's not planning. It's a very specific type of experience. And often what I hear people say is it's that feeling of being stuck in your head, looping the same thoughts, replaying conversations, running scenarios over and over and over again, and still not feeling settled. And I think that that's really important is to highlight that overthinking is often accompanied by a physical sense of not feeling settled.
Hmm. Okay. So that sounds like almost to me the sort of imagery that I get when you say that is being stuck in a loop.
Right. So the image that comes to my mind and that I often use with my clients is if your car, like let's say that you happen to go off the road or you parked in mud and your back tire is spinning and spinning and spinning, and you think that it's propelling you forward, but really what it's doing is it's digging you deeper into a rut.
Mm.
That's really what I think about when I think of overthinking. It's something that people think is going to help them get out of or be safe from something. And instead, what it's doing is it's just digging you deeper and deeper into a rut.
Yeah. And I know you sort of said it's not the kind that helps you to plan for stuff, but I get the feeling that as you said, people think it's going to help them plan for stuff. So it's almost it's almost addictive. Like the more you think, the more you do it, the further ahead you'll be.
Right. And I mean, as always, most of the things that we talk about from like a subconscious level, overthinking isn't actually about the thoughts themselves. It's about that felt sense of safety that accompanies overthinking. It's it's our
Mm.
minds like stepping in to manage discomfort or uncertainty where our system doesn't feel fully secure and being like, okay, well, I'm going to work on this to give you that felt sense of safety.
Okay. But it sounds like it doesn't actually provide that sense of safety. So I guess that's why you keep doing it more and more because you feel like, oh, if I haven't reached that sense of safety, I clearly haven't thought enough about this yet. So I need to dig
Right.
into it more.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
All right. So why is that feel so automatic for some people? Why do some people really turn to it?
Again, going back to safety, for a lot of people, overthinking was an adaptive tool, right? It was a way that your mind comforted either a scared part of you, or thinking ahead helped them avoid mistakes or conflict, avoid emotional fallout, or being blamed for something. If you're always one step ahead, then you're safer. And so, depending on the environment that you grew up in, then it's easier for you to fall into that if that was sort of the coping that your mind picked up along the way.
Yeah, I can see that. And what tends to trigger it then for those people who may find themselves doing it?
Yeah, so uncertainty obviously is a very big one. And what I
Mm.
really find is that it's uncertainty involving other people. So, what I mean by that is waiting for a response to a text message or an email, anticipating a conversation that's coming up, making a decision that doesn't have a guaranteed outcome.
Mhm.
Those moments, I'm thinking through client things, and, like, those moments really light it up very quickly, very fast when things are unclear. The system our systems, they sense risk, right? And so and I always tell my clients, the mind loves closed loops. And so when a loop is open, overthinking steps in to try and close those loops. If I can think this through enough, if I can create enough scenarios of why X, Y, or Z is happening or why it's not happening, right? Then that closes the loop temporarily.
Mhm. Yeah. And then what makes it so hard to stop? Because you talk about closing the loop, and I'm in thinking to myself, like, anytime I've been overthinking about anything, and that's a good example, waiting for someone to respond to something. I can think of times, maybe a few years ago where I was in that position where I would kind of like be waiting for someone to respond and I'd have made this whole story in my head. And
Right.
it was never enough. It was never enough.
Right.
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 So why is it so hard to stop? I would feel like if I said, oh, well, this is going to happen, then that's going to happen, I could stop. But no, it would be go on and on and on and on and on. So why is it so hard to stop?
Because we are not often logical humans. We are emotional humans. And
Mm,
overthinking, it sounds reasonable. It sounds responsible. It sounds like problem solving. It sounds like being careful, right? And stopping those things feels very unsafe, right?
mm,
But we're not waiting for the perfect answer. We're waiting for safety. And because certainty around certain things is rarely available, then the loop
mhm,
just continues. It stops when our nervous systems, or when we stop and we remind ourselves that we are actually safe. And one of the things that I really like to do when this is happening with my clients is I usually like to do a worst case scenario exercise with my clients. And what that does is it helps them realize one of two things. So, oftentimes, what the brain does is it takes us to the absolute, like, very worst, lying in a gutter, dead somewhere, worst case scenario. And so then we have the opportunity to say, how likely is that outcome based on what you're dealing with? The answer is 99.9% of the times the very worst case scenario thing is likely not going to happen. And then the
mhm,
other thing that it helps them recognize is that when they're more logical, when I'm able to stop the emotional component, is that if the worst case scenario did happen, that they could actually handle it, right?
mhm,
So I'll say, okay, if that did happen, What would you do? And then we're able to kind of go back and forth about, well, see, you can handle that. And actually, the worst case scenario isn't that bad when you really think about it.
Yeah, I definitely get that. I'm thinking about 2 things. One is I used to, I guess, catastrophize or have this worst case scenario about being unemployed and living in the streets, and it would go to, like, the extreme.
Right.
Um, and then one day I realized, like, you know what? I have been unemployed. I have actually been in a position where I lost the substantive place that I lived, and actually I was fine because I was able to sort it out. It was fine.
Right.
And I realized that was the logical way of looking at it, even though I'd been doing it for a while, right? Like a long time, I'd been having that fear. And so I get what you mean about recognizing that you can handle the worst case scenario. So yeah, I definitely get that.
Yeah, I mean, we've
Um,
all been there, right? So I just want to
mm,
validate like your experience. I mean, we've all been there where it's like worst case scenario. I think about when I was starting my private practice, when I was taking the leap from agency work into my own private practice. And I was just like, well, first of all, so many of my clients came with me from the agency. But then I kept thinking, what are the actual odds that number one, that none of my clients will come with me? And number two, that I will never get any clients ever again suddenly
mm,
because I'm now out on my own. Small,
yeah.
right? So
Yeah, I get that. And the other thing I was thinking about was something that happened recently. I was really overthinking about something work related. And I realized, when you talked about not feeling resolved, like physically feeling resolved in your
yes.
body, I realized that the situation actually got resolved,
Mhm.
right? I was overthinking, okay, what if I don't hit this deadline? Da, 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 da. Anyway, deadline came, I hit it, it was fine. And I realized I still could feel
Mm,
that unresolved physical feeling. And
right,
it kind of made me realize, like, this feeling, not that it isn't related to the overthinking,
right.
but overthinking isn't going to resolve the feeling. Because if the thing actually got resolved on its own and I still felt that way, then there had to be something else I needed to do to resolve that feeling, or some other way of tackling it that overthinking almost wasn't related to.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And so that's the thing, and maybe we'll talk about this a little bit more later, but overthinking is it's often just a signal around safety. And sometimes it's not even, as you said, it was resolved, but maybe there was something else, or maybe there was something deeper that was creating that feeling or that
Hmm.
sense within you, and that needed to be looked at. It was just that that particular situation brought it to the forefront for you,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, definitely. I know obviously you talked about overthinking as a way to kind of get yourself into feeling safe,
Mhm.
right? Is there anything that overthinkers are avoiding as well? Have you found?
This is really where often I'll say things like, let's get you out of your head and into your heart, right? So, overthinkers, gosh, where do I start? They're avoiding vulnerability, fear, uncertainty, disappointment, the possibility of being misunderstood or judged or blamed, right? There's overthinking keeps you in your head so you don't have to feel what's happening in your body. If you're analyzing and replaying and rehearsing, you're staying one step removed from what your brain typically perceives as overwhelming emotions. And so it's subconscious protection because at some point, feeling, feeling openly, being vulnerable, that might not have been safe. So your system learned to stay firmly in your head. Thinking often feels much safer than feeling. And so overthinking becomes a buffer between you and your emotions.
Yeah, I can see that. And I can see that because it feels like you're doing something. Like, at least that's how it feels to me. Like,
Yes.
if I'm feeling physically uncomfortable, I feel like I don't feel like I'm doing anything. But if I'm overthinking, it's like, you're actually doing something about it. This is great. And so it's kind of almost like a false sense of action, let's say, even
Yes.
though you're not actually doing anything.
100%. Absolutely. I'm going to call myself out. So, I have a therapist who is an amazing therapist. And so she said to me, we were talking about something that we frequently talk about. And she was like, okay, I hear you logically, but have you allowed yourself to just sit with the feelings of that? And I hadn't recognized because what I had done is I had wrapped it into a neat little bow logically in my mind to make sense of it, but I hadn't actually allowed this was something that happened a long time ago, right? So what my mind had done was thought about it and, put it into whatever logical way that I could think about it. And she was like, okay, well, how about you allow yourself to feel it? I was like, oh my God, you're right. I need to allow myself to feel this.
Uh, I get that. I'm definitely guilty of that. So I definitely get that. Um, why do some people actually overthink when things are going well? I can almost understand it because I can think of a lot of the things I was overthinking was because I was worried about, you know, being unemployed, or like you said, you start your business and you're kind of on something that is inherently unstable.
Right.
But why do people overthink when things are going well?
So, depending on how you grew up, being surrounded by calm can feel suspicious. For many people whose nervous systems learn to stay alert, ease and calm doesn't automatically register as safe. It can feel like the calm before something goes wrong. So when things slow down or they improve, the system doesn't relax. It starts scanning in hyperdrive. What am I missing? What could happen next? It's the
Hmm.
nervous system, it's staying ready because it doesn't fully trust yet that that stability can last. This is something that I work with a lot of my clients on is like, okay, you are no longer 10 years old. You are no longer relying on your parents for safety and security. You are an adult. You provide safety and security for yourself. And you've been doing that for yourself and a lot of times for children, and so here's proof that, you are now safe and secure and stable in a way that you weren't whenever you were 5, 10 years old.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely get that. And it makes sense. I know it sounds a bit silly, but the feeling I get is, when you're watching a film, right? And you're like maybe halfway through the film and everyone's like, "Yay!" And you're like,
Hey, first of all, if anybody's
Something else is gonna."
if anybody's yaying midway through a
Yeah.
movie, they've never watched a movie then.
Exactly, something awful is gonna happen, and I it's that feeling of dread, even when things are going well, so I totally understand that. So right at the beginning, you said that people either really judge themselves for overthinking, or they may not realize they're doing it at all. So let's start with the people who may not realize that they're doing it at all. How can someone tell that they've maybe slipped from planning and being organized and being sensible into overthinking?
Overthinking feels endless.
Hmm.
It's the same thoughts looping, there's no resolution. Planning feels contained. There's a beginning, you're starting out and making the plan. There's a middle, like the planning process. There's an end. Okay, I've planned my packing list or something like that. You think something through, you gain some clarity, your body moves on. And again, this is where the feeling piece of things comes in. I was taking a drive somewhere the other day and I made a little pack list that I needed to take with me. Okay. I made the list and I moved on. It wasn't this endless cycle where overthinking is like you don't feel clearer, you feel tighter, right? So again, like I think about it in terms of even packing. So
Mm.
I have found for myself that I can tend to sometimes be an overthinker when it comes to packing, right? We all joke. This is a joke I see widely on social media, which is if I haven't worn something in the last year, why all of a sudden do I think when I'm going on vacation that I am going to need said thing that I haven't worn in the last year, right? If I'm checking the weather and packing for every possible emergency, heat, snow, rain, what happens if this rips? What happens if I lose my suitcase? What happens if I get a surprise dinner invite or the car breaks down or an alternate life? And that's how I feel about it sometimes. I'm like,
Mm.
am I living in an alternate life where suddenly because I'm on vacation, I'm gonna wanna wear this thing, or suddenly because I'm on vacation, I now need 50 pairs of underwear for a week-long vacation? Like, what
My
what actual universe am I living in? Right?
Yeah. So that's mine. I'm like, you know, I'm going on vacation. I think I need 17 pairs of pants and 28 shirts.
Right.
Well, 3 for each day or 4 for each day, because what if when I put one on, then it gets a little stain on it, and then I'll need another one, and I'm still going out and it's like, it's ridiculous. I often go away and come back with half the stuff that I was like, "I never even wore that thing." In fact, as you said, I never wear this thing. I don't even know why I brought it. But
Right.
I definitely get that for packing. Yeah, I could totally understand that. What's happening in the body when someone's overthinking?
Yeah, it's very physical. It's kind of like this low grade fight or flight state. It's like a
Mhm.
tightness in my shoulders. It's a shallow breathing. I feel restless around it. It's
Yes.
like I can sense the hamster wheel going in
Mhm.
my head.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even if I'm sitting still, my body is preparing for something.
Yeah, and it's so funny because, earlier you said that people kind of overthink to stay in their head and out of their body, but the irony of it is the body is 100% in there. It's not you're not in your head at all. You're physically
Right.
quite you're also in your body more than you probably realize.
Yes, absolutely. And that's why I'll have some people who come to me and they're like, I don't know why I'm so tired. Like, I work from home, this, that, and the other. And it's because they're perpetually in overthinking. They're overthinking every interaction. They're perseverating on something their boss said. They're thinking about what their mom said. And I'm like, well, it's because even if you don't recognize it on a conscious level, subconsciously your mind is churning on this thing about your boss or this thing about your mom. So you feel exhausted, even though you haven't physically been doing anything, you haven't been exerting physically. It can
Mhm,
feel very exhausting to be in a
mhm.
state of overthinking.
Okay, I can see that. And of course, we talked a little bit about those who may not realize that they're overthinking.
Mhm.
But you said that also there's some people who do it, but they kind of make themselves feel bad about it. Um, don't know if you can say a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's really where it becomes like the identity based things. Like, I think people sometimes feel shame about it. They feel shame about overthinking because they recognize it's like almost like it's like they're looking at themselves. They can see themselves falling into the pit that they don't know how to get themselves out of it, and they can maybe sense how that is impacting other people in their lives. Let's say that you have a partner or a friend who's constantly overthinking and they're coming to you and they're saying, "What about this? And what about this? And what about this?" That can feel like, "Oh, this is just the way that I am," like an identity-based thing, and
Mm,
then I feel like that's where a lot of shaming about this is just who I am versus recognizing like, oh, this is a coping skill that you developed based on likely something that has happened in your life that told you that you need to overthink things in order to be safe. Does that make sense?
yeah. Yeah, I definitely see that. And I guess the thing with something becoming almost identity based
Mhm.
is that sometimes people think, "Well, this is it. This is me. This is who I am." Like, you know, and they don't, it almost can come with a sense of almost hopelessness because, like, you feel like it's never going to stop.
Right. Hopeless, helpless. Like, I can't stop this. I don't know how to stop this.
Yeah, definitely get that. So, how does hypnotherapy help overthinkers? I know you said you do work with a lot of clients who may be overthinkers, whether they recognize it or not. How does hypnotherapy help with that?
So most times, thinkers will come to me and they'll say, I'm pretty certain that I cannot be hypnotized. I'm pretty sure. And I'm like, okay. And then I ask them the typical question that I ask is, have you ever driven somewhere and you've lost track of, how you got there, but you arrived and you were like, oh my gosh, I don't even remember the drive. And they're like, yeah, yeah. I'm like, okay, well, then you've just gone into a hypnotic state. One part of you has shut down because you don't fully remember the drive, but obviously you were awake and driving, right? And so I find that it is well, that's really helpful at the start, but handing over the reins to someone else to be the guide
Hmm.
can often be really helpful for overthinkers. Knowing that we're putting that part of them part of the mind that overthinks kind of to sleep in some regards, it's like an exhale. It's like they finally feel like they can breathe again because number 1, I'm a trusted person who's guiding them through the process. They don't have to think about the process. They just have to allow whatever is gonna come up to come up. They trust that I'm going to guide through the process. It gives their system a break. And that can feel like huge relief, and then we can access the subconscious without that constant commentary or that resistance. We're no longer trying to out argue the thinking mind, we're working underneath it, right? And so I actually find it kind of sounds counterintuitive, but I actually find that I love working with people who feel like they can't be hypnotized or who are overthinkers because it's me saying to them, "Come on, hand me the keys, hand me the reins. You get to relax and rest now. Hand me the keys." And obviously that's built on a relationship of safety and trust
Of
that they
course.
trust me to do that. But I love it. It's great to see people just let their guard down in that way.
And, the loaded question of it all, do you think it's possible for someone to be able to stop overthinking?
Yes, I do. I will out myself in that I not as much anymore, but I was a chronic overthinker. And I think that, yes, it can be stopped because part of it is just about the awareness that you're doing it.
Mm,
And then from there, using different tools and techniques to ground your nervous system into safety, whatever that looks like for someone. But I do think that it's the same thing as when we're trying to do anything else. We need awareness. You and I have talked about money patterns before. It's like you need to
mm,
know what you're spending on before, like what's coming in, what's going out before you can shift or change something. I think the same is true with overthinking. You need to recognize, okay, what are situations that cause me to go into overthinking? How do I think that this is helping me? What are some when I notice this, what are some things that I'm going to do to help ground myself? And I think that when you catch yourself in those patterns more frequently and you make the shift more quickly, you can
mm.
definitely change things.
Nice. And when someone notices they're overthinking, then what would be like the first step for them to take?
It goes back to, as I always say, the awareness piece of things first. And then I think that it's less about, right, how do I stop this? And instead about what would help my system feel a little bit safer right now. And that alone can shift things. And then what I really love is just the brain dump. Get the thoughts out of your head onto a piece of paper or onto a notes app or something like that. I really think of it, it's kind of like hitting save on a document, right? When everything's swirling in your
Mhm,
mind, it feels like you have to keep it open or you're afraid that like you're going to lose it. Keep it running, keep looking at it so that you don't lose it, right? And brain dumping is you hitting save. The thoughts are safely contained. They're not being ignored. They're not going to disappear. You can always come back to them when you're calmer, more grounded.
mhm,
The reality is that sometimes you don't come back. Sometimes you don't need to come back. Sometimes you
mhm,
do, and then you can look at it with a clearer mind and you
mhm,
can recognize, "Oh, I don't even need to pay attention to that thing anymore." And then you can pull the most important things from it. And sometimes you honestly just don't. I can't tell you how many notes I have in my notes app where I just needed to get something out of my head, and then it honestly wasn't even that important. It was just something that my mind had grabbed onto to
mhm.
perseverate on and to feel like I was doing something about it. I don't know. It's an interest. I don't know if you've ever had that experience where you're like,
Oh, absolutely, definitely, I've had that experience. I've had the experience of doing that brain dump and writing things down and sometimes going back to it and being like, "What was I what?
right,
Like, why was this a problem? It clearly has such a simple solution."
right,
So I definitely, can see that. And yeah, sometimes there are things that helped, but I'm almost not certain what they were. Like, when you were saying earlier about those money patterns, that was something that actually came to mind for me, um, because it's something that I've been working on changing my own relationship to that. And I don't know I don't know what caused it to change, but I felt like I could ask myself different questions about it. But
right.
I think something else had to be true I had to almost have some sort of realization before I could mentally put myself into a place where I could ask those different questions, if that makes sense.
Right. Right. Well, the way that I'm getting a visual of overthinking in terms of somebody holding something and then someone throwing something else at them and then someone throwing something else at them. And it's
Mhm.
like at a certain point you drop the things that you're holding because too much is being thrown at you. And so when you put things down, like you said, you were able to ask different questions, but when you put them down, you're able to get a different perspective on it. Maybe um it feels less overwhelming than someone throwing something at you perpetually
Mhm.
and feeling like I can't catch it.
Absolutely.
Right? You feel like you
Absolutely.
can breathe a little bit. And so that's often why writing them things down, brain dumping, getting them somewhere else, you can look at things from that different perspective and you can really make different decisions about things. So,
Yeah. Absolutely.
wonderful.
Yeah, that's great. That's really good. It's been great discussing this and thinking about it. And yeah, I think that idea around trying to create that safety and thinking that you can do it in your head,
Mhm.
at least that's me.
Right.
So yeah, it's interesting to kind of unpack that a bit more.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, and I want to go back to something I've talked about with you. Sometimes it is, just running it by someone, having somebody who you can just say, "Hey, I don't actually need like a solution. I just need you to listen so that I can hear myself. I can actually hear myself." When it's all circling in our minds, it's very hard for us to
Mm,
discern and pick apart what it is we're actually trying to get to or what we need to be focused on. And sometimes I find that the mind continues to bring things up because it is afraid that you're going to lose something. It's like, I'm going to keep you thinking about this thing over and
mhm,
over again because I'm afraid you're going to lose it. Writing it down, talking it out with someone else, that helps feel like, okay, I'm not the only one holding on to this now. Someone
mhm.
else is, or my notes app or my notebook, they're also holding on to this. So I don't have to, your mind doesn't have to constantly loop it to the front of your mind. Right.
Yeah, I definitely get that. And, I find it interesting that you like working with people who think they can't be hypnotized, so that would make sense. So, sounds like if someone's out there and they're, like, not sure, you need to call Allie.
Right, right. I find it to be I love a good challenge, and
Mhm,
so I wouldn't even say that it's a challenge. I think that it's more so an honor to be able to take the pressure off of people who are caught in that chronic overthinking cycle and to show them that it is actually possible for them to release and let go of that pattern and that everything will still be okay, right?
nice. I love
Yeah,
that. Sounds like
yeah,
a great way to kind of wrap this up nicely.
all right. Sounds good. So, if this episode resonated, I hope that it helped you see your overthinking a little differently and maybe give you a bit more compassion for yourself in those moments when your mind just won't slow down. So, if you know that overthinking is a pattern that you keep falling into, keeping you stuck in your head, looping the same decisions, or making it hard to trust yourself, and you're ready for support that actually works with your nervous system, I would love to connect. You can head to shiftyourstorypodcast.com and schedule a connection call. We'll talk about what's been coming up for you and what support could look like moving forward. All right, that's all for now. We're sending you so much love and gratitude. Until next time. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us today for this episode of the Shift Your Story, Change Your Life podcast. If today's conversation sparked something in you, I'd love to hear about it. Feel free to send me a message on social media. I'm at the Allie Rose on both Facebook and Instagram. And if you want to be coached on a future episode or explore what it would look like to work with me one-on-one, head over to shiftyourstorypodcast.com. And if you never want to miss an episode, make sure to subscribe and leave a rating and review. It helps more people find this work. Until next time, keep shifting, keep growing, and most importantly, I want you to remember that your story isn't set in stone. you always have the power to shift it.